Hello, Anthropology 333. This is Wyatt Allen, and I did my report of an indigenous group over the Kurds. The Kurds are a group of people in the Middle East. They are a cultural linguistic group of both European and Asian descent. They are native to Western Asia in the Middle East and Eastern Anatolia and Asia Minor. There are between 30 and 45 million Kurds living within the Middle East and abroad. They are considered an ethnic minority in almost all the nations of which they inhabit. The environment region upon which they live in is desert and mountains and hilly plateaus, but mostly desert throughout the regions they live in. This includes Asia Minor, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Georgia. They have few natural water sources within the land that they inhabit. This land that they inhabit is the land that they call Kurdistan, which inhabits the regions of Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, Iran, and Iraq. They have two rivers flowing through their land that they call Kurdistan. One of them would be the Tigris River. And they have a few natural lakes, but mostly, for the most part, they have very few natural water sources. In terms of material culture, the Kurds in the past made their houses out of mud with a flat roof. This was used to act as gardening tool and reflect the sunlight off of the roof to ensure that they would be able to survive the harsh summer days. It would also double as a garden. In terms of food and cuisine, they would eat mostly lamb for meat or chickens. They were primarily herding people in the past, so these animals were perfect for herding. In the modern times, they make more modern houses typical of desert dwellers in the Middle East. These homes being made out of wood, mud, or plaster. They also wear they've been wearing the traditional garbs of the Middle East for much of the time. These include the basic robe and sash and headdress to reflect the sun, usually made of light colors. And they still eat their traditional foods along with more variety from the modern industrial complex. So foods imported from abroad add to their diet, but they still mostly stick to their traditional foods. In terms of customs, they share the New Year's holiday with Iraqis, and in terms of sports and festivities, they love football. As most countries in the world, football is their favorite pastime. They even have a team representing them from Iraq. So the Kurds have a team in Iraq that represents them. They do not have a team anywhere else, given that they do not possess an actual nation of their own yet. They have seen a rise in their culture in Iraq, Iran, and other occupied territories thanks to their new and revamped movie cinema industry, courtesy of Kurdish cinema. In terms of noble members, we have three people who are really the soul, the soul of the Kurdish people. That'd be Mufa Mustafa Baranzi. He was the founder of the Kurdish Democratic Party back in 1960. He rebelled against Iraq for control of the area in which the Kurds reside, and his coup failed. But he was able to secure rights for the Kurdish people within the state of Iraq. His son, Musaddad Bazandi, became president of the Kurdish region. His grandson became the president of the Kurdish region in 2005. His mandate, however, expired in 2017. Those two together created what we consider the first really Kurdish region within one of its occupied territories inside one of the states of which they inhabit. This would be Iraq. Another person worthy of mention is Hamidi Ukalai, I think is how you pronounce his name. He was the founder of Chobani, a yogurt company, and he advocated for Kurdish rights ever since he left Turkey and lived in the United States. He still lives in the United States today and sells his yogurt brand abroad while still supporting Kurdish nationalism. In terms of their land, the Kurds traditionally live in northwestern and eastern Anatolia, including most parts of the Middle East. Today, they inhabit most of this territory, with some exceptions. The exceptions, the Kurds in central Anatolia or Turkey, are live in significant despotorial communities, in which they inhabit other cities within the occupied nations in which they live in. This being Turkey, many of them live in Istanbul and other major cities throughout Turkey, but for the most part, most of the population of the Kurds live within the traditional regions of which they inhabit, which includes central Anatolia and the Middle East. The Kurds do not have any reservations within any of the nations of which they live in. However, in Iraq, they do possess their own minor ruling system under their Iraqi constitution. The Iraqis allow them to govern themselves in certain respects as long as they pay taxes to the Iraqi central government. The most important struggle that the Kurds have is the creation of a Kurdish state. This problem has stemmed back centuries, but it really came to a head back during the World Wars. During World War I, the Kurds lived in the territory that was known as the Ottoman Empire, which ruled much of the Middle East. The Kurds have been controlled by the Ottomans for centuries. During World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was defeated, the Kurds had their first chance of a truly independent Kurdish state from all other nations in the Middle East. However, the Western allies, who had promised them this land, ended up going back on that promise in 1920 during the Turkish rebellion. When the Turks rebelled and were able to overthrow the British and French rule over the newly mandated areas of the Middle East, the British and the French went back on their promise to the Kurds and instead gave this territory to the newly formed states of Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. Since then, the Kurds have had very little success in ever obtaining their dream of having their own home country, though they have made efforts since then to try to obtain this goal. The Treaty of Lausanne was the treaty that with Turkey that got rid of their chance of having a truly independent Kurdish state. The Kurds have had very little success in their primary goal, which is to create a truly independent Kurdish state. However, they have been successful in obtaining rights from the countries of which they inhabit. This being in Iraq, that they're allowed to have representatives who rule over them that are Kurdish, or at least speak Kurdish. They're allowed to live by their own customs and allowed to worship their own faith as they please. In Turkey, they have gained some rights under the Turkish constitution, though the Turks mostly recognize them not as an indigenous group, but as an ethnic minority group. In Iran, they have received very little rights. However, thanks to the UN Indigenous Accords, they were able to obtain some recognition under the Iran Constitution back in the 1970s, which has since been revoked. In conclusion, the Kurds are a vibrant people with a very fascinating culture and history. In the past, they were artisans and herders. In the present, they retain many of these same qualities as a people, being known for their prized rugs, being known for their herding capabilities and their cuisine, and their fascinating cinema culture, which has been developed since the founding of the Kurdish territories within the territories that they inhabit. They've had difficulty claiming their homeland from the nations that dominate the Middle East. This includes Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. But the Kurds will continue to strive for their rights and have been doing so for decades. And perhaps one day they will fully see the creation of their own Kurdish state. Thank you, and have a good day.